Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, the number I gave out is, based on modeling. And I think it's entirely conceivable that if we do not mitigate to the extent that we're trying to do, that you could reach that number. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, you could make a big soundbite about it, but the fact is it's possible. What we're trying to do is not let that happen. So instead of concentrating on the upper and the lower, we're saying that we're trying to push it all the way down. But the second part of your question was, yes, we feel that the mitigation that we're doing right now is having an effect. It's very difficult to quantitate it because you have two dynamic things going on at the same time. You have the virus going up and you have the mitigation trying to push it down. But the decision to not prolong, but to extend this mitigation process until the end of April, I think was a wise and prudent decision. Dr. Burks and I spent a considerable amount of time going over all the data, why we felt this was the best choice of us, and the president accepted it. So, in direct answer to your question, the idea that we may have these many cases played a role in our decision in trying to make sure that we don't do something prematurely and pull back when we should be pushing.
So thank you. I mean, you all know you've all seen the models. You've seen the models from Imperial. You've seen the models from Columbia. We've reviewed 12 different models. And then we went back to the drawing board over the last week or two and worked from the ground up, utilizing actual reporting of cases. It's the way we built the HIV model, the TB model, the malaria model. And when we finished, the other group that was working in parallel, which we didn't know about, HIME, and Chris Murray, ended up at the same numbers. So if you go on his website, you can see the concern that we had with the growing number of potential fatalities. All of the flu models predicted anywhere between 1.6 and 2.2 million fatalities if we didn't mitigate. I think you all knew those numbers. Some of them predicted half of the United States would get infected and have that level of mortality. So we worked very hard together to really look at all of the impacts of the different mitigations that have been utilized around the world and use that evidence base to really bring that data and that evidence to the president to consider for extending, which is not a simple situation when you ask people to stay home for another 30 days. And so they have to know that we really built this on scientific evidence and the potential to save really hundreds of thousands of American lives. And we know that's a huge sacrifice for everyone. We know it's a sacrifice for every mother and child and father who's also self-isolating. There are people that have to go out to work, and we know the compromises that they're making, but it's all to protect not only Americans, but the healthcare providers. The healthcare providers that are on the front lines, and you've seen them, and you've seen how difficult this has been. And so we're really working. There will be a comprehensive piece presented on Tuesday that really talks about not only diagnosing individuals, but also increasing our surveillance now that we have more test kits, so that we can really stop and contain new infections. At the same time, we're really dedicating test kits still to the critical diagnosis so people can get the treatment that they want. And so that we can ensure as when people come to the hospital that they know that the nurses and the doctors and the equipment that they need will be there to serve them. Because together as Americans, we're going to bring down the number of infections so we don't have 2.2 million deaths or 1.6 million deaths, but really work very hard to keep this in the lowest numbers we possibly can.
I just want to reiterate, because a lot of people have been asking, well, what would have happened if we did nothing? Did nothing. We just wrote it out. And I've been asking that question to Tony and Deborah, and they've been talking to me about it for a long time. Other people have been asking that question. And I think we got our most accurate study today, or certainly most comprehensive. Think of the number, 2.2, potentially 2.2 million people if we did nothing. If we didn't do the distancing, if we didn't do all of the things that we're doing. And when you hear those numbers, you start to realize that with the kind of work we went through last week with the $2.2 trillion, it no longer sounds like a lot, right? So you're talking about when I heard the number today, first time I've heard that number, because I've been asking the same question that some people have been asking, I felt even better about what we did last week with the $2.2 trillion, because you're talking about a potential of up to 2.2 million, and some people said it could even be higher than that. So you're talking about 2.2 million deaths, 2.2 million people from this. And so if we can hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000, it's a horrible number. Maybe even less, but to 100,000. So we have between 100 and 200,000. We all together have done a very good job, but 2.2 up to 2.2 million deaths, and maybe even beyond that. I'm feeling very good about what we did last week. Yes, please, go ahead, please.
Given that you're setting these guidelines, was floating Easter a mistake, do you think? And can you tell us why?
It's just an aspiration. We actually will be hitting, potentially, this was with our meeting before, on Easter, we probably, but that could be a peak, that could be a peak period, that could be the peak, sadly to say, it could be the peak number of deaths before it starts coming down. No, that was aspirational. We had an aspiration of Easter, but when you hear these kind of numbers and you hear the potential travesty, we don't want to do anything where, we don't want to have a spike up. We don't want to do it soon, and then all of a sudden you go down, you're coming down, and then you start going up again, because we discussed that can happen, and we don't want that to happen. We've gone through too much. So that was an aspirational number. I didn't say Easter. I said it would be a great thing if we could do it by Easter, and we know much more now than we knew 2 or 3 weeks ago. Easter should be the peak number, and it should start coming down, and hopefully very substantially from that point. Okay? Thank you. Please.
Jen Pellegrino with OAN.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, your approval ratings have been the highest they've ever been, as well as the ratings on your handling of the virus. Yet there are some networks that are saying they're debating whether or not to carry these briefings live. Do you think there's a link between the two?
Well, I don't know. I know that, well, that's a nice question. Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't want high approval ratings for this. I wish we could have our old life back. We had the greatest economy that we've ever had, and we didn't have death. We didn't have this. We didn't have this horrible scourge, this plague, call it whatever you want, the virus. But we're working very hard. That's all I know. And I see things. I see numbers. They don't matter to me. What matters to me is that we have a victory over this thing as soon as possible. When you hear that 2.2 million people could have died if we didn't go through all of this, and now the number will be, a much lower number. Hopefully it's going to be the numbers that we're talking about. So I appreciate it very much, but what I want is, I want our life back again. I want our country back. I want the world back. I want the world to get rid of this. This again, 151 countries, and we're going to do it. We're going to have a great victory. We're going to have a great victory. Go ahead, please.
You mentioned it, I just want to make sure I was right. So Humana and Cigna are going to waive for all costs for anybody that's got the coronavirus. They're going to take care of everything?
Well, that's what they said. I told you what they're going to do.
Right.
Co-pays in particular, that's a big deal. Insurance companies don't do that, and I appreciate it. Humana and Cigna, they should be getting a lot of credit for that.
Will there be other companies, or just those two?
Well, those two are getting a lot of credit right now for it, and they should, because it's something that, it's a lot of money they're waiving. And so we thank them. Will there be other companies? I wouldn't be surprised.
Are you calling on that?
There's great spirit. I'll tell you what, yeah, I'd love to have them do it. Let them waive those co-pays. There's a great spirit in this country right now. I mean, I know insurance companies better than anybody. They just don't do that. But now there's a spirit like I have not seen. I have never seen anything like it. I mean, even the media is much more fair. I wouldn't say all of it, but that's okay. They should be fair because they should want this to end. This is about death. So I want to thank Cigna and Humana. Thank you.
Will the federal government be reimbursing those insurance companies, or is this something they really are just doing out of their pocketbooks?
They haven't asked for reimbursement, so I assume they're not. They said they're going to waive them. Waiving them doesn't mean we're going to waive them and get reimbursed. No.
Okay. And second question for you, sir. First of the month is 3 days away. I know these cash payments, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said today about 3 weeks they should get there. for people that are worried about paying rent, I know mortgages through HUD is taken care of, but I'm just curious about rent. What should people be doing for the first
So
of
they're
the
going to
month?
be getting the money. I will tell you, I think landlords are going to take it easy. We may put out a statement on that. I think a lot of people that are owed money are going to take it easy. They don't sort of have a choice. But a lot of concessions are made, just like the insurance companies. A lot of concessions are being made that wouldn't have even been thought of 3 weeks ago. Not even thought of. So a lot of really positive things are happening. Please, behind you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, why did you publicly threaten quarantine on New York, New Jersey?
I didn't do that at all. Read the statement. Read the statement. Read what I said. I said we're going to look into possibly quarantine. I didn't say we're going to quarantine. I looked at it as a possibility because a lot of our professionals suggested quarantine. I said we're going to look at it. We then looked at it. You see, who are you with, Bloomberg, right? I can't imagine. Let me just say, I didn't threaten it. I don't go around threatening. What happened is people, professionals, very good professionals, love the idea of doing that because that's sort of the ultimate in distancing. You can't do. They didn't want New Yorkers where they're having a problem necessarily going down to Florida where they have less of a problem. So the concept of quarantine was thrown out to me. Really would love to do it. They would love to do it. And I thought it was too much to do because the people are doing a great job with it. Also, it's very hard to enforce.
Well, by speaking about it publicly, and letting it be known that it's a consideration, do you think that you may be frightened some
No, I
Americans?
think we made people aware to stay in your houses and do good. Now we did an advisory. It's a strong advisory. The governors are running the advisory, the 3 governors, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And I think we did a great thing. But all I did yesterday, as you know, and you can see it, you can read it, and you can see very simply that I said that we are looking into it. And then before the end of the evening, substantially, we decided to go with the advisory, which frankly I liked better from the beginning. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 questions. The first is, you said repeatedly that you think that some of the equipment that governors are requesting, they don't actually need. You said New York might not need 30,000. You said it on Sean Hannity's Fox News. You said that you might.
Why don't you people act? Let me ask
You said
why don't
something.
why don't you act in a little more positive? It's always trying to
My
get
question to you
get you. And you know what? That's why nobody trusts the media anymore.
My
That's
question
why
to you, how is that gonna
Excuse me,
impact?
you didn't hear me. That's why you used to work for the Times and now you work for somebody else. Look, let me tell you something. Be nice. Don't
Mr.
be
President, my
threatening.
question
Don't be
is-
threatening. Be nice. Go
My
ahead.
question is, how is that going to impact how you fill these orders for ventilators or for masks? Your
How can
views
it
that
impact?
it's not going to
We're
impact you at
producing
all.
tremendous numbers of ventilators. We're doing a great job on it. Mike Pence, our vice president, has headed up the task force, which has been incredible, the job they've done. We have everybody in the White House working on it. We have everybody in the country is working on this in one way or the other. The fact is, we've done a great job of delivering. You've seen the biggest people in the business. I mean, there's nobody even close to this group of people. We had a meeting at 3 o'clock. It lasted for a long time. It was a great meeting with the generals and with everybody else, and they have done a fantastic job. I'm just saying this, if they're holding, let me give you one example. We sent thousands of generators to New York. They were put into a warehouse, a New York warehouse that happened to be located, interestingly, in Edison, New Jersey. They were given to New York, and we then went to other places, also giving thousands of ventilators. The people in New York never distributed the generators. We said, why didn't you distribute them? Now, you have to understand, they have New York people working in those warehouses. They knew they had them. So we said, why didn't you distribute them? I hope they've distributed them now, but maybe they didn't need them so badly. But just so you know, we're all, you, me, everybody, we're all on the same team. You know, when journalists get up, and you're a journalist, a fine journalist, when journalists get up
Sean Hannity.
and ask questions that are so threatening.
I was quoting
we're all
you
on the
directly
same
from your
team.
interview with Sean Hannity.
Take a look at my interview. What I want to do is, if there is something wrong, we have to get to the bottom of it. When I hear face masks go from 10,000 to 300,000, and they constantly need more, and the biggest man in the business is like shocked. He knows all about the virus, by the way. He's not surprised by that. He knows all about it. He shouldn't be surprised. He should say, well, that's standard, because this is really a very tough disease. This is really a very tough virus to handle. Okay.
Mr. President, my second question
Go ahead. That's enough.
is,
Thank you very much. Please, please. That's enough. That's enough. That's not fair to your other reporters. It's not fair. You had a long time, a long question. If we have time, I'll get back to you for your second question. Is that okay? All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to follow up on previous questions, you said that the peak will hit in 2 weeks.
Well, we don't know that, but we think the peak will hit.
You think it will hit
Right,
in 2 weeks?
that is our two doctors here.
Can you just share with us your understanding of how bad it will be so the American people will be prepared for it?
Well, I can. I think I'll ask doctor and doctor. Maybe you could both come up and give your opinion on that, because that's really.
And I have another question on
Okay,
Italy,
please.
please.
Thank you. I mean, we have great concerns when you look at the model. As I told you, look at the Chris Murray model, where he shows a rapid escalation, and you can see it happening. That the people we're losing every day throughout America, and you can see it going up, just like cases. And we're starting to lose people at the same rate, and we have deep concerns about that. And I think we're meeting and we've had calls with the clinicians, and that has been extraordinarily helpful. I think you're watching the alerts. I mean, we have a different population than Italy or Spain. And so because of that, our doctors and our nurses are getting information back really quickly so that they can talk to each other about how to really combat this. We're seeing things here that weren't reported in other countries. And so I really want to appreciate, I know doctors and nurses are going full out, but they're also taking the time in their 2 hours of sleep to write us about what could be happening when you see the cardiovascular disease and others. So in the model, and there's a large confidence interval. And so it's anywhere in the model between 80,000 and 160,000, maybe even potentially 200,000 people succumbing to this. That's with mitigation. In that model, they make full assumption that we continue doing exactly what we're doing, but even better, in every metro area with a level of intensity, because we're hoping that the models are not completely right, that we can do better than what the predictions are. But we're tracking it very closely, and I think there's people around the United States really helping us. Scientists across the country have really given freely of their time to really help us not only model this, but really assure that the American public knows how important it is that they stay doing this. You know, you could see from the recent data, and I have Dr. Fauci talk about young people that are being impacted here. We didn't see that the same way in Europe, but our population is about 8 or 9 years younger. And so we have to be attentive to all aspects of this, to children, to young people, to adults. We know still the people with pre-existing conditions and the elderly are at particularly high risk, but we don't want to lose any American. And so that's why I think the president came to the conclusion that at a minimum we have to continue what we've been doing, but even better, to every metro area out there, we have to do better. We have to ensure that we're protecting each other. Tony,
So, at the risk of offending my modeling colleagues, models are good, but models often generate the kind of anxious question that you asked, is how bad could this possibly get? And as I said many, many times, a model is as good as the assumptions that you put into the model. And very often, many of these assumptions are based on a complexity of issues that aren't necessarily the same, as Dr. Burke said, from one country to the other. So when you give a model, you have the worst extreme, you have the best extreme. Often the worst extreme means that you don't do anything. You just, as we say, let it rip and let it go. If you go to the lower end, that means you actually mitigate it really to the utmost. So what I like to do as a scientist, a physician, a public health official, is to not ignore models, but say, look at the data as it's evolving and do everything you possibly can to mitigate that instead of getting overly anxious about the extremes of the model. Again, not to push them aside completely, but the reason the president made the announcement today about going to the end of April is because we want to make sure that we don't prematurely think we're doing so great. We may be, but we want to push it to the extreme. So take that with you, and maybe you'll be less anxious. Okay.
President, on behalf of the foreign pool, sir, You mentioned Italy.
Just to finish with, so what both were saying and what Dr. Fauci just brought up, we don't want to do well and then end a little bit early and have it start going up again, because that would be a disaster. Go ahead, please.
You mentioned Italy. Italy is a close ally of the United
Yes.
States. They are facing catastrophic time.
Yes?
They have been receiving help from countries like Russia, China, even Cuba. Cuban doctors have been sent to Italy. Is the United States stepping in to
Yes,
help
we are.
a
In
close
fact,
ally of
I
Italy?
met last night with our people. We're sending them a lot of different things that we're not needing because we're obviously in need of a lot also. And we're also helping them monetarily. We're helping Italy a lot. We're working very closely with Italy. We're working closely with Spain too, which is really hit hard. And we're working with everybody. I spoke with Angela Merkel the other day. Germany's hit hard. And their mortality rate is different, I think, because they do more testing. But their mortality rate is much different. Italy's mortality rate is very high. So is Spain. But we're working very closely with them. Yes, we had a big meeting on it last night. Admiral Giroux, would you please come up and just talk a little bit about the tremendous success that's been made on testing from where we started? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. So as of close of business yesterday, we have been able to perform in the United States over 894,000 tests. So highly significantly increased every single day. Those tests are performed at a number of places, in hospitals, in your neighborhood, in the public health laboratories, the state public health laboratories, and in our territories, as well as the large reference laboratories that are members of the American Clinical Laboratory Association. They have done over 650,000 tests, including over 840,000 just yesterday. I met with all their CEOs yesterday. They're fully committed to increasing testing to meet the requests and the demands of the President and Vice President. A couple words on the point of care test. Point of care means you stop, you get the result right there that the President and the Vice President talked about by Abbott, approved in record time by Dr. Steve Hahn and the FDA. This is a point of care test, meaning that from the time to swab to the time you get a positive result, 5 minutes like the President said, and at most 15 minutes for a negative result. So just think of it as a 15-minute test. This is not an esoteric test. There are 18,000 of these little toaster-sized machines all over the country in doctors' offices and hospitals right now, and Abbott will be providing 50,000 or more tests per day starting on April 2nd, with the first shipments out already. This complements other point-of-care testing like the Cepheid test that we announced about a week ago. We also have moderate platforms, so it's not just about the number, it's the type. We have point-of-care. We have moderate platforms that are in hospitals and in larger clinics and academic medical centers. And then we have the very large tests. You've heard Ambassador Birx talk about the Roche tests and the Roche platforms that are in some of these big reference laboratories. So it's not just about the number, but it's about painting this very complex ecosystem so that everybody who needs a test can get a test. On priorities, remember, we are still prioritizing those in most need, those who are in hospitals or in ICUs, because that test makes a difference to how they're being treated. Symptomatic first responders, healthcare workers, and as Administrator Verma will always say, those in long-term care facilities who are at high risk. One last point. I've learned more about nasal swabs than I ever thought I would want to learn in my entire life, but it was a very big thing that the FDA approved last week, and it will now be implemented this week. Instead of having a provider stick this all the way in the back of your nose, that's uncomfortable, but it also requires PPE changes every time it's done. The FDA approved, with lots of data supporting it, self-swab of your nose. So literally put a swab, certain kind of swab, foam swab in your nose, put it in a plastic bag, give it and drop it. This not only increases the speed, but it eliminates all those changes of PPE. So we will be implementing that this week, which will increase speed, but also save our precious resources as we build them up in the stockpile and out to hospitals. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Admiral, very much. Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. President, you mentioned that the peak could come in 2 weeks. Can you ensure that everyone that needs a ventilator, every single patient that needs one will get one, will get there in time? And my second question is, after invoking the Defense Production Act yesterday with GM, you said that there were a couple of problem children that may require using your authority again. What are those companies and what aren't they meeting?
Well, I don't have to tell you because those companies have come into line. They're doing a great job. They're working very hard, 24 hours round the clock. So I don't want to give their names now because they've been great. They've come into line. And by the way, General Motors is doing a fantastic job. I don't think we have to worry about General Motors now. They've really done a job. And what the Admiral said also, I think we can add this, Admiral, the reason we show more cases than anybody else in the world is we're doing more testing than anybody else in the world. So we have more cases because we're doing far more testing than anybody in the world. And remember, we started with a system that was broken. For many years it was broken. And I'm not blaming the last administration. I'm saying other administrations. And our pipeline had very little in it. Just like we had no ammunition, we had very little medical, we had very little in our pipeline. Now we have ammunition, more than hopefully we'll ever need, and we also have a pipeline that's packed. And now we have those 10,000 ventilators that we can use because you need some quickly. I mean, this goes quickly from place to place. I'd love to give them all out right now, but we need them quickly. I don't want to give them out and then we have to take them back and move them someplace else. So we're very much prepared, please.
Mr. President, states like Florida have reportedly had 100% of their requests for supplies from the National Strategic Stockpile filled, but other states like Massachusetts have not. So how is that assessment being made and why has Florida gotten its request?
Well, I think you're going to find that almost all states, look, I was on the call yesterday with the governors and they were happy with the job we're doing. And I'll tell you what, if you had a different administration, they would not have been happy. These are people that speak their mind. They were happy. It was falsely reported by a couple of people that, oh, gee, they weren't. They were happy. They were thrilled. Florida has been taken care of, and Michigan has been taken care of. Very important state. To me, it's very important because I'm so proud of what we've done bringing car companies back into Michigan. And we're now dealing with the governor, and I think, Mike, I can say that a lot of good things are happening in Michigan. Massachusetts, we're dealing with the governor very strongly, and we're trying to get things to Massachusetts as rapidly as possible.
Why has Florida received 100% of its requests compared to some other states? Is there a
Well,
reason?
Florida, look, they're very aggressive in trying to get things, and they're doing a very good job. But I think I can say all of the governors are very committed. We're very committed. We're working together, and we're getting things out at a level that nobody's ever seen before. You can speak to FedEx, you can speak to UPS, you can speak. They've never done anything like this than what they're doing right now, and nobody in the world has been able to match what these great companies have been able to do. If we left that to government, it would have been a tough thing. We have mobilized private enterprise. We have mobilized the greatest companies in the world. And what's happening is incredible. And that includes Abbott, where Abbott comes out and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes up with this incredible test that simplifies everything. It makes it so easy. So I think you're going to find most states are very happy. I'm dealing with the governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards. He's a Democrat. If that's what you're getting at, but I'm dealing with him very successfully. I think he's very happy. I think he's actually amazed at what he's been able to get. In fact, we were even forward thinking. I suggested we send additional ventilators and other things. We're building a hospital in Louisiana, very importantly. We're building hospitals in New Jersey. Governor Murphy of New Jersey is a terrific guy, and frankly, he wants, he's got a pretty hot spot right there, right next to New York. And we're doing hospitals, we're doing ventilators, we're getting a lot to Governor Murphy, that's New Jersey. Last night I spoke to the governor of Connecticut. We had a great talk with him. We are really doing a job. Look, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he's been terrific. We sent him a boat way ahead of schedule, the ship way ahead of schedule, hospital ship, the Mercy, with 1,000 beds, operating rooms, and it's been in LA for 3 days already. So I think they're really happy. And when you think about it, in New York, we built 2,900 hospital rooms, beds. Nobody's ever seen it before. The governor's never seen anything like that before. This was done by federal government, not by state government. This was done by the federal government. They're opening it tomorrow. I wanted to be there so badly, but Secret Service and all of the people involved won't let me. They won't let me. I would love to be there, but they won't let me for obvious reasons. But I would have loved to have been at the opening tomorrow of the hospital in New York, Javits Center. But we're very proud of the job we've done. We've mobilized and getting better and better every day. And the task force headed by your vice president, the job they've done, and they don't even sleep. Okay, any other questions?
May I just follow up on your letter to the governors that you sent, since we were on the topic of governors? You sent a letter to governors at the end of the week saying that you guys are going to be developing criteria to be able to classify counties based on whether they were hotspots or whatnot. And I wanted to know if you have enough tests currently to be able to accurately rank those counties.
Yeah, we're ranking counties and we're ranking states. And a lot of people put out false information because they don't know what they're talking about. And we took over a dead, barren system. We took over a system that was obsolete. It was good for a tiny little sample of people. And even that didn't work because when CDC first looked at their test, the biggest problem they had is the test didn't work. That wasn't from us. That's been there a long time. Now we have the best tests in the world, and nobody has. Now they're all calling, can we get the quick test? We call it the quick test, where, by the way, probably more accurate, and it takes a few minutes. I mean, it's pretty amazing what we've done. No, we're getting along great with the governors. Yeah, go ahead, please. No, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you more specifically about the strategy that you plan to unveil on Tuesday. What factors are you taking into consideration? What can the American people expect? And is it possible that these April 30th guidelines could be extended?
Well, we hope not, but we think it's going to, we have aspirational thoughts. We would have loved to have been a little bit sooner, but we have to do it right. We could have done it. We could have done it on Easter, but there was a good chance that if it's coming down or if it's still going up, maybe it's going to be coming down by then, but we just felt it was too soon. We can't take a chance. Again, because of what we've done and because of the fact that we've stopped the flow from China so early, because the question is from a lot of my friends, why don't we just wing it? Why didn't we just wing it? And I kept asking, and we did models now. Finally, we got these models in. And you hear about the 2.2 million people would have died. I don't mean we would have had 2.2 million cases. These are 2.2 million people would have died. 2.2 million people. Look, we're going to have a meeting or speech or press conference or something on Tuesday. I thought what I was going to announce the end of April on Tuesday, but I said, let's do it now, because somewhere along the line it's going to leak. We might as well just do it now and get rid of all the leaks. This way it did nice and clean. But we have to really do a great job for another couple of weeks, and I think we're going to be in great shape. And we're going to be in a position, even with what we're trying to do with restaurants, with deductibility, we have to get these restaurants back in. We have to get our businesses open. We have to get the planes flying. We have to get everything going. We have to get even the cruise ships. I mean, we have to get those cruise ships moving along. We had the greatest economy